At exactly 0317 hours on March 1, 2026, the global energy supply chain, the invisible artery feeding 20% of the world's oil, was severed in a single catastrophic act of desperation. Deep inside the fog-choked waters of the Strait of Hormuz, the Erg Navy's fast attack flotilla operating under a classified directive codenamed Operation Maharam Shield executed a maneuver no Western defense planner believed Tehran would dare to trigger: a full maritime blockade of the world's most critical choke point. 56 Erg Cape 3 fast attack craft, screaming at 55 knots across the black surface of the Gulf of Oman, fanned out in pre-programmed attack vectors. Simultaneously, shore-based Noor anti-ship missile batteries along the Bandar Abbas coastline went active, their fire control radars painting every vessel in the strait. A 150 ship logjam of supertankers, LNG carriers, and container ships ground to a standstill, oil markets already rattled. By 72 hours of US Israeli airstrikes under Operation Epic Fury went vertical. Brent crude spiked past $142 a barrel in 3 minutes. This was not chaos. This was the calculated final card of a regime under existential siege. What you are about to hear is the minute-by-minute account of how the United States Fifth Fleet shattered that blockade and why the next 48 hours will determine whether a regional war becomes a global one. Do you believe the U.S. can keep the strait open? Comment 1 below. The trigger event began 12 hours earlier. At 1,504 hours on February 28th, US B-2 Spirit stealth bombers flying from Diego Garcia released GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators, each weighing 30,000 pounds, onto the Fordo nuclear enrichment facility buried 300 feet beneath a mountain in Qom province. Satellite imagery confirmed structural collapse across 3 of 4 known centrifuge halls. Simultaneously, 200 Israeli Air Force F-35 Ayadurs, flying codenamed Operation Roaring Lion, struck 487 targets across Iran ballistic missile launchers, Erg command nodes, the Parchin weapons complex, radar arrays, and the leadership compound in northern Tehran. At 03 for 1 hour's Tehran time, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, supreme leader of the Islamic Republic, was killed. Iranian state media broke the news in tears. At the exact same moment, the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group, 230 nautical miles south-southeast of the Strait of Hormuz, received flash-level orders from CENTCOM: prepare for CGACS Contingency Plan 801008. A contingency war gamed 1,000 times in digital twin simulations. The game was now live. Iran's response was swift, multi-vector, and designed to inflict maximum psychological damage. Within 90 minutes of the opening strike, Erg ballistic missile batteries launched coordinated salvos across Khuzestan, Fars, and Isfahan provinces. Over 420 ballistic missiles and Shahed 136 kamikaze drones arced across the night sky, targeting US bases at Al Udeid in Qatar, Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, Camper Ifjin in Kuwait, and Ali Al Salem Air Base. THAAD batteries and Patriot PAC-3 MSE interceptors engaged in a kinetic ballet CENTCOM would later describe as the most complex simultaneous multi-axis air defense engagement in American military history. Radar operators aboard the USS Bataan, tracking 22 separate threat tracks on the AN-SPY-6 air and missile defense radar, coordinated intercepts over Link 16. 80% of incoming missiles were stopped. The remaining 20% produced the headlines. A Shahed 136 drone penetrated the radar shadow at Naval Support Activity Bahrain and detonated against a Fifth Fleet radar installation. 6 US service members at Port Shuaiba in Kuwait were killed by an Iranian drone that hugged the coastline below the Patriot and MPC-53E's minimum detection altitude. Iran escalated. At 0317 hours on March 1st, Erg Naval Headquarters activated the blockade. The plan was elegant in its brutality. 42 Noor anti-ship missiles, Iran's reverse-engineered C-802 variant, sea-skimming with a 165-kilogram warhead, sat in hardened coastal launch cells along the 34-mile-wide strait. Simultaneously, underwater warfare units deployed Manta-class bottom mines across the Hormuz traffic separation scheme, Yono-class midget submarines, each displacing just 120 tons, acoustically near invisible in shallow water, slipped into blocking positions beneath the tanker traffic. The Cape fast attack boats were the visible deterrent. The missiles and mines were the killing edge. Any supertanker captain who ignored the Erg's demand to heave to faced a Noor missile traveling at Mach 0.9, 3 meters above the wave surface. 150 vessels lay dead in the water. The world was watching. What the Erg did not know was the speed of the American response architecture already moving beneath the surface. The USS Nebraska, a Virginia-class fast attack submarine running dark at 800 feet in the Gulf of Oman since February 24th, had already mapped every Erg vessel's acoustic signature using its NBQ-10 sonar suite. The Nebraska's fire control team had preloaded targeting solutions on 14 paycape craft. At the surface, guided missile destroyer USS Gravely, in emissions control silence 30 nautical miles off the Omani coast, activated its AN-SPY 1D radar and acquired 48 separate Erg contact tracks, the Aegis baseline. 9 system processed all 48 tracks in 1.2 seconds, assigned kill chain priority, and illuminated its Mark 41 vertical launch system cells. Aboard the Gerald R. Ford, the first wave of E-18G Growlers stood ready on Cat 1. They're an ALK-99 tactical jamming pods tuned to the precise emission frequencies of the Noor missile's active radar seeker, a technical coup from a recovered Iranian dud analyzed by US naval intelligence in 2024. The Growlers would blind the coastal batteries before the first kinetic shot was fired. At 03 for 1 hour, CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper authorized Execute Order Hormuz Restore. The response was immediate and invisible to the naked eye for the first 90 seconds. For a 1Z Viper attack, helicopters from USS Bataan, flying nap of the Earth at 60 feet, crossed into Iranian airspace through a radar gap identified by an ARC U-170 Sentinel drone orbiting silently at 65,000 feet for 11 days. The Vipers carried AGM-179 JAGM missiles pre-locked to GPS coordinates of 3 Erg fast attack boat clusters that had failed to disperse. Within 40 seconds, 6 paycape vessels were sinking. Simultaneously, E-18G Growlers at maximum jamming output flooded the coastal Noor battery fire control radars with precisely targeted electronic noise, rendering tracking screens white with digital static. 3 Erg battery commanders attempted to shift to optical backup. They were denied. EFA-18F Super Hornets had already launched TAG-80 ATR Manti radiation missiles that traced the radar emissions to their source and destroyed the antenna arrays in sub-second terminal profiles. The Noor batteries were blind beneath the water. USS Nebraska fired to Mark 48 ADCAP torpedoes at 55 knots. The Yono-class midget submarine preparing to fire at a U.S. destroyer had its propulsion destroyed before its torpedo tube doors finished opening. 60 RC Hawk helicopters deployed in AIC US-22 sonar arrays ahead of the tanker convoy route, mapping the mine threat. 12 Manta mines were marked and their GPS coordinates transmitted to EOD dive teams by 0423 hours. A 1.8 nautical mile corridor was declared safe for transit. At 0511 hours, 1 hour and 54 minutes after execute order, Hormuz Restore, the supertanker Seawise Colossus, 440,000 deadweight tons, crossed the Hormuz traffic separation buoy under escort of USS Gravely and USS Gonzalez. Overhead, 4 F-35C Lightning Eyes on combat air patrol projected a radar bubble 300 nautical miles in every direction. The strait was open. 17 Erg fast attack craft sunk or neutralized, 3 Noor missile batteries destroyed, US coalition losses in the naval action, 0. Iran fired a final FAT E-313 ballistic missile from a mobile launcher in Hormozgan province, the Aegis system calculated. An intercept in 0.8 seconds. A single SM-3 block IIA from VLS Cell 7 destroyed it at 85,000 feet, a white flash visible to every sailor in the task force against the pre-dawn sky. But the war was far from over. Even as the strait reopened, Iranian Shahab-3 missiles struck the Saudi Aramco Ras Tanura oil terminal, igniting fires across 3 storage tanks and having Saudi export capacity. Hezbollah launched 16 FAT E-110 missiles at Haifa's naval base. Iron Dome stopped 14 to struck pier infrastructure. Lebanon had reignited. In Iraq, 67 Iranian proxy drone and rocket attacks hammered the Victory Base complex near Baghdad airport. By 0600 hours on March 1st, kinetic conflict burned across Iran, Iraq, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait, the UAE, and Qatar. 13 countries were simultaneously inside the blast radius of a war that began as a targeted nuclear strike and cascaded into the most complex multi-domain conflict since the Korean War. The lesson being written in fire across the Persian Gulf carries a message no defense ministry on earth can ignore. Iran spent decades constructing asymmetric deterrence fast boats, shore missiles, proxy networks designed to make a strait closure prohibitive. The United States military operating with complete information dominance. From 16 days of pre-positioned collection assets, dismantled that doctrine in under 2 hours. The submarine that mapped the Iranian mine deployment. The Sentinel drone that found the radar gap. the intelligence officers who recovered the Noorseeker frequency from a retrieved dud, the E-18G crews who spent months tuning. They're jamming pods to that exact frequency. None of this was improvised. Every element had been rehearsed, pre-positioned, and pre-authorized. The Iranians built their deterrent assuming they faced the U.S. Navy of 2003. They encountered the U.S. Navy of 2026 networked, sensor-fused, and running a kill chain measured. In seconds, not minutes. What concerns serious analysts is not what happened on March 1st. It is what comes next. Iran's new supreme leader faces a military with 80% of its ballistic missile capacity destroyed. The rational calculation is de-escalation, but rational calculations have been conspicuously absent from this crisis since February 28th. The Strait of Hormuz remains open today. The Fifth Fleet remains at threat condition Delta. 46 armed conflicts are active on this planet as of March 2026, the highest number since World War II. This is not a moment for commentary. It is a moment for attention, because the next decision made in Tehran, Washington, or Beijing will be made in a world where the old deterrence frameworks have been tested to destruction and no one yet knows what replaces them. Never mistake American restraint for American weakness. When that line is crossed, the response is as fast as it is final. Stay sharp. Stay informed. What do you believe happens next? Comment below.